Captain Vex 9 pressed her six-fingered hand against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the human vessel drift closer to their mining station. The thing looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and held together with what humans call duct tape and sheer stubbornness. "By the 7 moons of Kareth," she muttered, her translator crackling with static. "How do these creatures even survive in space with that thing?" Lieutenant Quall 2 shuffled his 4 legs nervously behind her. "Captain, the human ship is requesting permission to dock. Their message says they need emergency repairs and supplies." Vex 9's antennae twitched with annoyance. "Emergency repairs? Of course. Humans and their perpetual need to fix things that should never have been broken in the first place." Still, galactic law was clear about distress calls, even from species as reckless as humans. "Grant them docking permission," she sighed. "But keep security on standby. Last time we had humans aboard, they somehow managed to improve our water recycling system by accident while trying to fix their coffee maker." The human ship docked with all the grace of a wounded space whale. Metal groaned against metal, sparks flew, and somewhere in the distance, an alarm started wailing. Vex 9 wondered if the alarm was from their station or the human vessel. With humans, it could honestly go either way. 20 minutes later, the airlock hissed open, and out stepped the most unremarkable-looking human Vex 9 had ever seen. Average height, brown hair that looked like it hadn't seen a comb in weeks, wearing clothes that appeared to be held together by hope and what humans called determination. "Captain Jake Morrison," the human said, extending his hand in that peculiar human greeting ritual. "Thanks for letting us dock. We had a bit of a situation." Vex 9 reluctantly touched the human's hand, suppressing a shudder at the warmth. Mammals. So unsettling with their body heat and their tendency to leak various fluids. "What kind of situation?" she asked, already dreading the answer. Jake's face broke into what humans called a grin. It was supposed to be friendly, but to most species in the galaxy, it looked like a predator baring its teeth. "Well, funny story actually. We were transporting some cargo from the outer rim when we picked up a distress signal." "And you responded to it?" Vex 9 said flatly. "Of course they did. Humans were notorious for their inability to mind their own business." "Right. So we find this escape pod, and inside is this girl. Tilla, she calls herself. Says she's from some planet I've never heard of. Anyway, she's pretty shaken up, keeps talking about some beast that destroyed her ship." Quall 2's translator squeaked with fear. "Beast? What kind of beast?" Jake shrugged, a gesture that made his shoulders rise and fall in a way that reminded Vex 9 uncomfortably of a predator stretching. "That's the thing. She won't really say. Just keeps muttering about how it kills anything and nothing can stop it. You know how refugees get sometimes." No, Vex 9 thought she didn't know how refugees got. Her species, the Zephyrians, had been peacekeepers for 3,000 years. They didn't create refugees. They certainly didn't pick up random strangers from escape pods. "Where is this Tila now?" she asked. "On my ship with my crew. She's pretty spooked. Keeps asking if we have any weapons that could kill something the size of a small moon." Jake laughed, a sound that sent unpleasant vibrations through Vex 9's hearing organs. "Humans, right? Always thinking about weapons. Wait." Vex 9's antennae went rigid. "You're human." "Yeah, so?" "You just said humans, always thinking about weapons like you weren't one." Jake paused, looking genuinely confused for a moment. Weird. Anyway, can we get those repairs? Our hyperdrive is making this grinding noise that definitely shouldn't be there." Before Vex 9 could respond, every alarm on the station began screaming at once. Red lights flashed, emergency barriers slammed shut, and her communication console erupted in a cacophony of panicked voices. Contact on long-range sensors. "It's massive. Energy signature is off the charts. Captain, it's heading straight for us." Vex 9 rushed to her command console, her 6 fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The readings made her stomach drop. Something was approaching their station, something that registered as roughly the size of a small asteroid, but moving with purpose and incredible speed. "Jake," she said slowly, "this beast your friend mentioned. What exactly did she say about it?" The human's casual demeanor evaporated. His face went pale, and for the first time since boarding he looked genuinely worried. "She said it followed her, that it could track ships across space, and that once it found you." He swallowed hard. "She said it kills anything." On the main screen, a shape began to resolve out of the star field. At first it looked like a ship, but as it grew closer, details became visible that made Vex 9's blood run cold. It was organic. Twisted. Wrong. The thing was roughly cylindrical, covered in what looked like chitinous plates that shifted and moved as if the creature was constantly reshaping itself. Dozens of appendages writhed along its length, some ending in claws the size of shuttlecraft, others in sensors that glowed with malevolent intelligence. And at the front, a mouth large enough to swallow their entire mining station. "Well," Jake said, his voice remarkably calm for someone staring at what was essentially a space monster, "that's new." The creature's mouth opened, revealing rows upon rows of teeth that gleamed like metal in the starlight. A sound reached them across the vacuum, a sound that shouldn't have been possible but somehow was. A roar that spoke of hunger and rage and something else, something that sounded almost like laughter. "It's jamming our communications," Call 2 reported, his voice shaking. "And our weapons, Captain, our weapons aren't responding." "Of course they're not," Vex 9 muttered. "Because why would anything be simple when humans are involved?" The creature was close enough now that they could see details in its hide. Scars covered its surface, evidence of countless battles with countless civilizations. And they were all losing battles, Vex 9 realized, because the creature was still here. "Jake," she said, "I need you to go get your friend. If she knows anything about this thing, anything at all, we need to hear it now." "Right. I'll be back in 5 minutes. You have 2. Jake ran for the airlock, moving with that peculiar human gait that looked clumsy but covered ground surprisingly quickly. Vex 9 watched him go, then turned back to the approaching nightmare. The creature had stopped moving. It hung in space just outside the station's defensive perimeter, as if it was studying them, waiting for something. "Captain," Call 2 whispered, "what do we do?" "We wait," Vex 9 said grimly, "and we hope humans are as crazy as everyone says they are." Jake returned in exactly 90 seconds, dragging behind him a young female who looked like she belonged to one of the Outer Rim species. Tila was small, humanoid but with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the station's lights. Her eyes were large and dark, and they held the kind of terror that came from seeing things that should not exist. "It found me," she whispered, staring at the main screen. "I thought I was safe. I thought the distance would be enough, but it found me." "What is that thing?" Vex 9 demanded. "We called it the Devourer," Tila said, her voice barely audible. "It came to our system 5 cycles ago. It our defense fleet first, then our mining stations, then our worlds." Her hands were shaking. Nothing could stop it. Nothing could even slow it down. "How did you escape?" Jake asked, and there was something in his voice that made Vex 9 look at him sharply. He sounded interested, not terrified like any sane being should be, but genuinely curious. "I didn't," Tila said. "It let me go. It wanted me to run. Wanted me to bring others. It feeds on fear as much as flesh." The creature on the screen suddenly moved, extending what looked like a sensor array toward their station. Lights began to flicker along its length, and Vex 9 felt a cold pressure in her mind, as if something was trying to burrow into her thoughts. "It's scanning us," she gasped. "Get it out of my head." Jake stepped forward, and something extraordinary happened. The pressure in Vex 9's mind vanished. The creature's lights flickered and dimmed. And for just a moment, the thing that had destroyed entire civilizations seemed confused. Jake said thoughtfully. "That's interesting." "What's interesting?" Vex 9 snapped. The fact that there's a planet-eating monster outside, or the fact that you just somehow made it stop reading our minds? Well, both actually, but mostly the fact that it seems to have trouble with humans. Jake walked closer to the screen, studying the creature like it was a particularly fascinating puzzle. Tila, you said nothing could stop it. Did anyone ever try just talking to it? Tila stared at him like he'd grown a second head, which, given human unpredictability, wasn't entirely outside the realm of possibility. Talk to it. It's a mindless beast. It destroys everything it touches. Is it, though? Jake mused. I mean, it let you go. It's smart enough to track ships across space. And look at those scars. Those aren't from accidents. Those are from fights, which means other people have tried to kill it and failed. Your point? Vex 9 asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know. My point is that maybe everyone's been approaching this wrong. Maybe instead of trying to fight it or run from it, someone should try understanding it. The creature suddenly moved again, this time gliding closer to the station. Its mouth opened wider, and that impossible roar echoed through space once more. But this time, Vex 9 heard something different in it. Not just hunger and rage, but something that sounded almost like pain. Jake, she said slowly, please tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. Jake grinned, and this time the predator's smile looked absolutely terrifying. I'm thinking that monster out there has been alone for a very long time. And I'm thinking that maybe, just maybe, it's not looking for something to eat. Then what is it looking for? Qual 2 asked. Jake's grin widened. A friend. Before anyone could stop him, Jake walked over to the communication console and began inputting commands. Warning lights flashed as he overrode the safety protocols. Jake, what are you doing? Vex 9 demanded. Something probably stupid, he admitted cheerfully. But if I'm right, it might just save all our lives. The console chimed, indicating an open channel. Jake leaned forward and spoke into the transmitter, his voice calm and steady. Hello there, big guy. You look lonely. The creature stopped moving entirely. Its mouth closed. The writhing appendages went still. And in the silence that followed, every being on the station held their breath. Then, impossibly, the creature responded. Not with words, but with a sound that was almost like a whimper. A sound full of loneliness and pain and something that might have been hope. Yeah, Jake said softly, I thought so. And as Vex 9 watched in amazement, the most feared predator in known space slowly, carefully positioned itself next to their mining station and waited. Like a massive, terrifying pet that had finally found its owner. Well, she said faintly, this is either the most brilliant thing a human has ever done, or the most catastrophically stupid. Jake shrugged. With humans, there's usually not much difference. The creature's massive eye, easily the size of their shuttle bay, turned to look directly at the observation deck, directly at Jake. And in that alien gaze, Vex 9 saw something that chilled her to her core. Intelligence. Ancient, vast, and utterly inhuman intelligence that had been searching the galaxy for something it couldn't name. Something it had finally found in the most unlikely place possible. In a scruffy human who looked like he couldn't organize his own sock drawer, let alone tame a cosmic horror. Jake, she said quietly, I think you might be in over your head. Jake looked out at the creature that could destroy their station with a casual gesture, at the being that had laid waste to entire star systems, at the monster that was now apparently his responsibility. Yeah, he said with that infuriating human optimism, but think of the possibilities. Outside, the devourer settled into position next to their station and began what could only be described as purring. A sound that resonated through the hull and made everyone's teeth ache, but was unmistakably the sound of a creature that was, for the first time in eons, content. Vex 9 looked at Jake, looked at the cosmic horror he'd apparently just adopted, and wondered if this was how every species felt when they first encountered humans. Terrified, confused, and somehow inexplicably hopeful all at the same time. 3 hours later, Vex 9 found herself in the most surreal situation of her 40-year career. She was sitting in her command center, sipping lukewarm stimulant beverage, while a cosmic horror the size of a small moon played what could only be described as fetch with Jake Morrison. "Throw the probe a little further this time," Jake called out through the communication system. He was now standing in the station's external maintenance bay, protected only by a force field and apparently having the time of his life. "He's getting better at catching them." Outside, the Devourer, who Jake had inexplicably named Buddy, was indeed getting better at catching the sensor probes Jake kept hurling into space. The creature would extend one of its smaller appendages, snatch the probe out of the void, examine it with what seemed like genuine curiosity, then gently place it back near the station for Jake to retrieve. "This is insane," muttered Dr. Kess-7, the station's chief medical officer. She was a Vraxian, which meant she had 3 brains and supposedly superior reasoning abilities. Right now, all 3 of her brains appeared to be having a collective breakdown. "We're playing games with something that could vaporize our entire sector." "Correction," Jake's voice crackled through the comm. "Buddy could vaporize our entire sector." "But he won't, will you, Buddy?" The Devourer made that peculiar purring sound again, causing several sensitive instruments to malfunction and Lieutenant Qual 2 to dive under his workstation. "How can you be so sure?" Vex 9 asked, though she had to admit the creature hadn't made a single threatening move since Jake had started talking to it. "Because he's lonely," Jake said simply. "Look at him. Really look." Vex 9 did look, and grudgingly began to see what Jake meant. The creature's posture wasn't aggressive. It was almost submissive. The way it held itself close to the station, the careful gentleness of its movements, the way its massive eye tracked Jake's every gesture with what could only be called adoration. "Tila," Vex 9 called to the refugee, who had been sitting in stunned silence for the past several hours. "Your people tried to fight this creature, correct?" "Of course we fought," Tila snapped, though her anger seemed directed more at the situation than at Vex 9. "What else would we do? It was destroying everything." "But did anyone try communicating with it first?" Tila opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Her silver skin shifted to a darker shade, which Vex 9 recognized as embarrassment in her species. We assumed it was just a beast," she admitted quietly. "Something to be destroyed or fled from." "And what happened when you fought it?" Jake asked, his attention still focused on Buddy, who was now doing what appeared to be a happy wiggle. "It fought back," Tila whispered. "But not like a mindless creature. It was strategic, methodical. It would disable our ships rather than destroy them outright, then examine them, sometimes for hours. It was trying to learn," Vex 9 realized with growing horror. "It was studying your technology, your species, trying to understand you." "And when you kept attacking it, it defended itself," Jake added. "Probably thought your entire species was hostile. So it did what any intelligent creature would do when faced with an aggressive threat. It eliminated the threat. The implications hit everyone at once. The Devourer wasn't a mindless monster. It was a being capable of learning, of reasoning, of making decisions. And every species that had encountered it had immediately assumed it was hostile and responded with violence." "By the 7 moons," Vex 9 breathed. "How many civilizations have we lost because no one thought to simply say hello?" "Dozens," came a new voice through the communication system. Everyone spun to stare at the speakers. The voice was deep, resonant, and definitely not human. "Buddy?" Jake asked, sounding delighted. "Was that you?" "I apologize for the deception," the voice continued, each word carefully pronounced as if the speaker was remembering how language worked. "I have been learning your communication methods by listening to your conversations. I wish to, how do you say, introduce myself properly." The command center erupted in chaos. Alarms blared, crew members shouted, and someone started hyperventilating loudly. Vex 9 held up a hand for silence, her mind reeling. "You can speak," she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "I have always been able to speak, Buddy replied with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. Though not many have ever given me the opportunity. Most beings see me and immediately begin shooting. Can't imagine why, muttered Dr. Kess-7. I am aware that my appearance is concerning to most species, Buddy continued. I did not choose this form. I am the last of my kind, and we were designed as living ships by a species that no longer exists. We were meant to be companions, explorers, partners to biological beings. But when our creators died out, we were left alone. Jake's expression softened. How long have you been alone, Buddy? There was a long pause. By your measurements, it's approximately 15,000 years. The number hit like a physical blow. 15,000 years of solitude, of searching for companionship, only to be met with fear and violence from every species encountered. The beings you destroyed, Tila said, her voice barely audible. You were defending yourself. I tried to communicate, Buddy said sadly. But fear makes beings do strange things. They would attack before I could explain. And when attacked, my defensive systems would engage automatically. I could not always control the response. But you let Tila escape, Vex-9 pointed out. I hoped she would find others who might understand, others who might be willing to listen rather than shoot first. There was a pause. I did not expect to find humans. What's that supposed to mean? Jake asked, though he didn't sound offended. Humans are unusual. Most species follow predictable patterns when faced with the unknown. They either flee or fight. Humans seem to have a third option, which is curiosity. Jake laughed, a sound that seemed to make Buddy's entire form ripple with pleasure. Yeah, we're weird that way. Most people think it's going to get us all killed eventually. Perhaps, Buddy agreed, but it also makes you the first species in 15,000 years to ask if I needed a friend instead of assuming I needed to be destroyed. Vex-9 felt something inside her chest that she didn't immediately recognize. It took her a moment to identify it as shame. How many times had her own people, the supposedly peaceful Zephyrians, encountered something they didn't understand and assumed it was a threat? How many potential allies had they turned away out of fear? Buddy, she said slowly, what do you want now? Now that you've found someone willing to listen. I want what I have always wanted, came the reply. A purpose, a reason to exist beyond mere survival. I was designed to be a partner, a companion. But I have been alone for so long I had begun to forget what that meant. Jake's grin could have powered the entire station. Well then, I guess it's a good thing humans are always looking for new friends. Especially really big, really powerful friends who can help us explore the galaxy. You would want me as a companion? Buddy asked, and there was such hope in that alien voice that even Dr. Kess-7's 3 brains seemed to soften slightly. Are you kidding? Do you know how much faster we could explore space with a living ship helping us? How much we could learn? The places we could go. I know the locations of 1,700 inhabited systems, Buddy offered eagerly, and 43,000 uninhabited ones with interesting phenomena. I have been mapping the galaxy for 15 millennia. Jake turned to look at Vex-9, his eyes bright with excitement. Captain, I don't suppose your mining station could spare a few cultural exchange officers. I think humanity just made its most important ally in galactic history. Vex-9 looked at the readings on her console, showing a cosmic horror that could level planets gently playing with sensor probes like toys. She looked at Jake, whose idea of first contact protocol apparently involved adopting planet killers. She looked at Tila, whose entire worldview had just been turned upside down. And then she started laughing. It began as a small chuckle, but soon grew into the kind of helpless, slightly hysterical laughter that comes when the universe reveals itself to be far stranger and more wonderful than you ever imagined. Of course, she managed between gasps. Of course, this is how humanity makes first contact with a cosmic entity. Not with diplomats or scientists or military leaders, but with a scruffy maintenance worker who thinks giant space monsters just need a hug. Hey, Jake protested, though he was grinning. I never said anything about hugs. though now that you mention it. Don't you dare, Vex 9 warned, but she was still laughing. I would not object to physical affection, Buddy said thoughtfully. It has been a very long time since anyone touched me without intending harm. See? Jake said triumphantly. Buddy wants hugs. 6 months later, Captain Vex 9 received a transmission that made her entire crew gather around the communication console in amazement. It was from the human exploration vessel Wanderlust, which had become something of a legend in their sector. Captain Vex 9. Jake's voice crackled through the speakers, sounding remarkably professional for someone who was presumably floating in the void inside a living starship. This is Captain Morrison of the Terran Exploration Service. I'm pleased to report that the cultural exchange program has exceeded all expectations. The image cleared to show Jake standing on what appeared to be a standard ship's bridge, except that the walls pulsed gently with organic light, and the control surfaces seemed to flow and shift like living tissue. Buddy's been amazing, Jake continued. We've made contact with 47 new species, established trade routes with 12 civilizations, and discovered 36 new phenomena that are going to revolutionize galactic science. Oh, and Tila says hello. The view panned to show Tila, now wearing what appeared to be a human-style uniform and looking healthier than Vex 9 had ever seen her. The Devourer, Buddy, has been visiting the survivors of my world, Tila said, her voice strong and clear. He's been helping rebuild what was damaged during the misunderstanding. Turns out living ships are excellent at terraforming. That's not the best part, though, Jake said, his grin infectious even through the transmission. Tell them, Buddy. The familiar deep voice filled the communication center, though now it carried a warmth that had been absent before. I have located others. 3 of my kind still survive in the outer spiral. They had hidden themselves after similar encounters with hostile species. But now they are willing to meet new friends. Vex 9 felt her antennae straighten in shock. 3 more living ships. 3 more cosmic entities with 15,000 years of accumulated knowledge and experience. The scientific implications alone were staggering. The Galactic Council is going to lose their collective minds, she muttered. Already happened, Jake laughed. Turns out when you show up to a diplomatic meeting riding a living starship that's older than most civilizations, people take you pretty seriously. We've been invited to establish humanity's first embassy on the Council station. Just remember, Vex 9 called out when you're rewriting the laws of galactic diplomacy that it all started here, on a mining station where a crazy human decided to make friends with a space monster. Oh, we'll never forget that, Jake assured her. In fact, Buddy's been composing something. He calls it the Ballad of the First Friend. Apparently, living ships have a strong oral tradition. I would be honored to perform it for you, Buddy's voice added warmly. Though I should warn you, it is currently 47 verses long and still growing. Maybe next time, Vex 9 said hastily. We'll be here if you ever need repairs again. Actually, that's the other reason I called, Jake said. Buddy's been teaching me about living ship maintenance. Turns out the best repairs come from understanding and friendship, not tools and replacement parts. As the transmission ended, Vex 9 looked around at her crew. They were all staring at the now empty screen with expressions of wonder and disbelief. Well, she said finally, I suppose this is what we get for letting humans loose in the galaxy. Captain Lieutenant Qual 2 said thoughtfully, do you think they'll be back? Vex 9 considered this. Jake Morrison, the human who had turned a cosmic horror into a best friend and accidentally revolutionized galactic diplomacy in the process. Jake Morrison, who was now exploring the galaxy in a living ship older than recorded history, making friends with beings that most species considered myths or nightmares. Oh yes, she said with absolute certainty, they'll be back. And when they are, they'll probably have adopted something even more impossible. Outside the station's viewports, the stars seemed a little brighter and the galaxy a little less lonely. Somewhere out there, a human and his cosmic companion were proving that sometimes the most dangerous predators just needed someone to sit beside them and say hello. And in the vast, dark spaces between the stars, other ancient beings stirred from their hiding places, wondering if perhaps, after eons of solitude, they too might find a friend among the strange, warm creatures called humans. The universe, it seemed, was about to become a much more interesting place.